Hi folks, welcome to the channel. This will be my first video of the channel. I want to talk a little bit about my EV journey coming from a traditional ICE car and yeah, specifically the BYD Sealion 7. So I'm going to give you a bit of a first impression after about 500 plus kilometers and how does it differ from when I first test drove it and now actually owning it. So stay tuned and let's take a drive. So just to provide a little context, why I ended up buying the Sealion 7. I live in Singapore, so as some of you may know, Singapore has a COE concept, or Certificate of Entitlement, which allows you to own a car for 10 years. So I was previously driving an Odyssey, and that was coming up to term, and unfortunately, either I renewed the COE, which cost quite a bit of money, I decided to go get a new car. So that was what it is, and at this moment, in Singapore, they were giving out some rebates on EVs, so it was a natural choice that the replacement car would be an EV. So to add additional context to it, I was pretty much set on getting myself a Tesla, to be fair. Even without trying other cars, I test drive the Tesla, loved it. You know, a little bit of adjustment, some of the nigglies of minimalism, but otherwise I did enjoy the car. But BYD was the #1 selling car in Singapore, so I thought, hey, maybe it made a lot of sense to kind of, you know, do my due diligence. Had a go at the other cars as well. So as part of that, I also included the Xpeng G6 because they were just new in town, and just so happened at BYD they were having a pre-launch for the Sealion 7, and that was where it all kind of began. So this was sometime in January of 25. They didn't have any cars on the road at the moment, so they only had showroom units. So you know, went in, had a quick look, and test drove it. So my first impression, frankly, the car build was awesome, right? So I did the back-to-back between, you know, a Tesla Model Y and obviously a Sealion 7. And the moment you sat in the Sealion 7, you could tell the difference was night and day. And I kid you not, and this is coming from, you know, me being somewhat of a Tesla fanboy, right? So I was thinking, oh yeah, you know, the build obviously, you know, it's all there. How would it do on a drive? So I took it off for a drive with the sales guy, and I was totally blown away. If I had to draw a comparison, it's almost like you were sitting and driving a Lexus equivalent. If there was no badge, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It was that plush, it was quiet, it had all the bells and whistles, and most importantly, the price point was really spot on. It was obviously, you know, targeted at those who are looking at Model Y, and then they threw in a lot of bells and whistles. In the end, it was a little bit cheaper than the Model Y, and you got a lot more value for it. So that was the first impression before I bought the car, right? As you would know, most of the time what you buy, you know, in that 20-minute test drive, it's not how it feels like when you actually own it. So now that I've kind of owned it for slightly more than a week, I put close to 500 kilometers on it, and I kind of got a good sense of, you know, the little quirks and what my thoughts are. So before that, my first impression, like I said, after the test drive, the build quality was fantastic. It's hard to fault the drive, everything is there. But the one thing that was severely lacking just by, you know, playing around with the car in the showroom for the 10-15 minutes, the software needs a lot of tweaking. When I say that, I'm saying it with comparison to what Model Y has to offer. But by and large, if you compare this with a traditional ICE car, well, there's really nothing much to compare, really. The software is everything you could need or more, right, from a traditional ICE car. But when you draw comparison with what you see on an Xpeng G6 and maybe a Model Y, yeah, there's some level of refinements that probably required. But having said that, I was still not too fussed about it, because if there's one thing I know, I mean, having worked in tech for a while, software is something that you would like to think that over time they could get it sorted out with the over-the-air upgrades. So now 500 kilometers in, does that assumption hold through? Yeah, pretty much. The build, yeah, again, no dramas there, all is good. But yes, there, you know, to kind of sum it up, The software, it's kind of a bit of a hit and miss. But having said that, once you figure out what the quirks are, it's okay. So I've seen a lot of people asking on the forums, on Facebook groups, like, oh, you know, should I buy this car? Is it reliable? Frankly, there is really no perfect car, if you like. It's a matter of what you're willing to pay, and at the end of the day, what you're willing to kind of give away, right? And for me, like I kind of briefly mentioned just now, the software I can live with, because I know eventually it will get fixed. But the more important part, the hardware bits all have to be there for the software to be tweaked against it, if you get what I mean. So let's double click into some of the nuances. So the first thing that comes to mind is actually the ADAS stuff. This is all the driver assisted warnings and those kind of bells and whistles, and you know, the beeps that goes on in the car. Obviously coming from an ICE car, let alone a 10-year-old ICE car, you don't have a whole lot of that. So when I first got it, it was a massive sensory overload. For a while there, you know, I had beeps coming out from every corner of the car. Not quite sure, you know, what it was, because they were all in little acronyms. And mind you, a lot of the menus on BYD and the text that shows up on errors or notifications are not necessarily very grammatically correct from an English standpoint. So yes, it was a massive sensory overload. It took me a while, but the good thing though is that I managed to kind of turn those warnings off in the console. So this is very interesting, because I've seen other videos prior to this on the other BYD models, say Atto or whatever the version is. Some of them, when you do actually turn it off, but when you restart the car the next time you drive, it all comes back on again. But thankfully with the Sealion 7, at least the Singapore version, yeah, the notification stayed off, so which was great. So I've now tweaked it to a certain level and customized it to the way I like it, just enough notification that it doesn't, you know, beep every like 2 seconds. So that's all good. So from a drive perspective, no dramas there. Very much like how an EV should drive. Very snappy acceleration, very smooth. The bumps, no dramas. I know this will be an unpopular opinion for those who love one pedal driving like the Teslas. Frankly, I found it extremely uncomfortable when I test drove the Tesla. So this is me coming from a context, me having young kids. So my kids typically sit on the back, and one pedal driving has a very significant amount of drag when you release the pedal on the regen braking, whereas the Sealion 7 is a little bit closer to what a typical ICE car is. So from a comfort level perspective, definitely for a passenger, it's not as jerky. And my kids tend to enjoy a little bit of a smooth ride, otherwise they get all giddy up and nauseated. Yeah, I don't actually enjoy one pedal driving, to be fair. So this is a major plus for me when it comes to the Sealion 7. The regen braking is very subtle. You don't actually even feel it. Of course, there is two modes. There is standard and the high regen. Now, even with the high regen, it is not crazy jerky. But otherwise, yeah, the comfort mode or the standard mode is more than sufficient for most. And for me, transitioning from a traditional ICE car to EV, it is like seamless, right? All the buttons and all the dials are pretty much where it should be from a traditional car. I initially thought I would get used to the Tesla, but after test driving the Model 3 and Model Y, I mean, as much as the minimalism was fun and interesting, yeah, I kind of still prefer the traditional ICE car feel. I knew exactly where things are, and to get started and the transition, seamless. So like I mentioned with the software, it's a little quirky, some of the stuff, and what's more interesting is if you look at other cars, typically if you look at say a Mercedes or BMW, the steering wheel is largely the same, the buttons are largely the same. Knowing some of the functions in one car, chances are you probably figure out the functions on the other car, right? But I'm not too sure it fits the same with BYD. It's almost like a iterative cycle with BYD. I've seen videos on Atto, you know, maybe Shark or Seal. They all have slightly differentiated layouts to their steering wheels and the buttons that they have. For example, I'm a big user in previous times in terms of cruise control. I like to use cruise control a lot. The main use case is in certain, you know, areas where there is a speed limitation. I usually lock it down on a certain speed and have the car cruise on that speed. So you would think that most cars these days have cruise control, and on the Sealion it does. So cruise control is typically known as ACC, and intelligent cruise control, or ICC, which is more synonymously known as autopilot in Tesla, there's only one button. And the funny thing about it is that I didn't realize how to actually engage cruise control without actually turning on ICC. I kind of bumped into it by chance because I had ICC turned on and I disabled ICC, and then you realize that you can actually set speed manually after that for ACC. I'm not too sure, or the cruise control, I'm not too sure if it made sense. So essentially you need to turn ICC on first before you can turn ACC on. If you have not engaged ICC throughout your drive, there is no way in hell you can actually even manually turn on ACC or the cruise control. So that was a bit of a learning curve, which was bizarre and odd to say the least. The manual, to be fair, didn't really explain it very well either. But once it was turned on, it was all fine and well. It worked the way it was supposed to. Cruise and held speed really well, and the auto matching of the speed with the car in front all worked very well. So some may be asking, why didn't you turn on ICC? I've got an interesting story with regards to ICC. So when I test drove the car, I wanted to test out ICC specifically because when I test drove the Tesla, the sales guy was selling me on how autopilot was great, blah blah blah, fantastic, right? So I wanted to kind of understand how ICC worked, and obviously there was a lot of caveats, you know, on forums and other videos complaining about how ICC isn't really refined. So during the test drive of BYD, they specifically told me, oh, you can't test drive ICC. We don't usually allow our customers to test drive ICC during the test drive. I found that really bizarre, but I didn't question it too much. Now that I've actually owned the car and I've used ICC for a little bit, I can kind of get a sense why perhaps it wasn't one of those things that, you know, they allowed our customers to showcase. It's got little quirks to it. It is not as refined as the autopilot on Tesla, to be fair. There was a few times when I turned it on, you know, in city driving, when, you know, typical small highways, inner city highways, if you like, and it didn't work as well as I thought it would. There were a bit of a, you know, misjudgment on lines, and yeah, it was scary to say the least. I wasn't very comfortable. On the larger highway where you have, you know, straight motorways with higher speeds, wider lanes, it seems to do a little bit better. With narrow lanes, not so much. So I probably wait to see refinements on ICC, and I'm pretty much certain they will. But for now, I'll stick with, you know, ACC, which is the cruise control, which I use pretty much on a daily basis. There's some other little quirks on consistency on the UI as well. So for example, you would think that some of the warnings would be at a certain place within the cluster. I then realized that sometimes some icons appear on a different side of the cluster, the same icons on two different occasions when you start the car, which was bizarre. Like for example, there was this particular icon that says the lane keep assist is turned off. Occasionally it appears on the right hand side of the cluster and sometimes on the left hand side of the cluster. Initially I thought maybe I just remembered it wrongly, but then I took notice a little bit more, and it did actually, yeah, appear on two sides of the cluster at two different moments. So yeah, just little things like that. Not a showstopper, but certainly, yeah, interesting choice of how things are being displayed on the UI. The other thing about consistency that was interesting was software versioning. You would think that they would have a generic software version for example, say version 2.x, and it's being rolled out to the entire fleet of BYD, and depending on the models, they will have the right drivers, etc., etc., that maps against that driver. So it's very easy to track. Initially, when I was researching about the car, I was wondering how is it that a big organization like BYD doesn't have release notes specifically. And then I realized it's actually very difficult to have release notes, because it seems to me that they release a new versioning capability or a versioning number sequence for every model that comes out. For example, the BYD Sealion 7, maybe Singapore specific, it's based on what I checked on the screen, it's version 1.0, which is fair. But I kind of know for a fact that the one that they launched in Thailand is probably version 1.0, but for Thailand only, because some of the UIs, specifically on the cluster, is slightly different between the ones in Singapore and Thailand. So this whole numbering scheme, I mean, it's not for me to judge, but definitely it's very, very difficult if you are releasing different versionings for individual countries and then also for individual models. So for example, the Atto may be at version 3, given that it's out for a while. And yeah, I mean, Sealion could be 1.0, and God knows what's going to be at 1.1. So every time the release notes, it's very, very hard to upkeep what's new and what's next. So as some of you may know, the BYD obviously also comes with mobile app. I downloaded the mobile app, and because the car was registered under my wife's name, so I needed to kind of set it up when I got home. So I didn't have the help of the sales guy to set it up when I picked up the car, which is fine and well. He gave me some instructions and I went ahead and did my thing. It took a little bit to set it up when I got back. It was quirky in most cases. One of the things that you need to know with Singapore specifically is that the cars are actually tied to an email address that you register against when you buy the car. So this is something that's done in the back end with BYD. But here's the funny and interesting thing. In some countries, you scan QR codes. So as you kind of get into the car, there's a new QR code you scan, and then you input, it takes that QR code and add it to your profile. And in some countries, it's email address specific. So how did I actually find this out? So I couldn't, log into the app, and I decided that, hey, there's a live chat function on the app. Checked it out, talked to a support person, and the support person went like, hey, yeah, we don't support the QR code anymore. We're doing this particular method. And when I pinged my sales guy and I shared with him my challenges, he's like, oh no, in Singapore we do it differently, blah, blah, blah. So there is definitely a disconnect between the support team that helps support the mobile app and obviously the ones in Singapore or whatever country that you may be buying your car at. So yeah, stuff that BYD needs to kind of figure out over time as they become a massive multinational and global company. Not a big deal, because ultimately, the car got connected, all is good. So yeah, from an app perspective, it's relatively basic. If you like the ability to start your car remotely, cool the car, check charge status, those kind of stuff, it's all there. It's not as feature rich as some that you will see on Tesla, so you don't actually have a lot of metrics, essentially just mostly notification. And yeah, I think it's good for what it is, right? And most use cases that we use the remote app for. Obviously, the remote app is highly dependent on 4G connectivity as well. By default, the ones shipped in Singapore comes with 4G connectivity. I've been told, the 2 years subscription is complimentary. So not sure after 2 years what's going to happen. I did ask the sales guy, how much it's going to cost after year 2. He has no answer for me. So yeah, we'll cross the bridge when they get there. I did actually have a small issue with the 4G specifically though. After the first 2 days, it suddenly dropped out on me and it never recovered. So I had to do a full reboot on the console, and after the reboot it came back on, and it's been good since, I suppose. No dramas there, but like all things in tech, when in doubt, just reboot. and usually fixes things. Given that little functions within the software is different between models and country releases, I might actually do another video just going through the entire UI on the infotainment system to give you guys a feel of what are some of the stuff that are actually on the Sealion 7 that may or may not be in the other BYD models. I'll consider doing another video shortly. It probably need me to kind of set up and take some time to do it. But yeah, stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, another question that I've seen come up a lot, it's mileage. Of course, if you look at some of the more elaborate videos, they were talking about how hungry this car is from a battery consumption perspective. So to date, I'm looking at about 16 to 17 kilowatts per every 100 kilometers. Yeah, a little bit more hungry than your typical EV, but for city driving, I guess it's not something you probably fuss too much about, especially in Singapore where the charging infrastructure is getting better and relatively decent. I'm a little bit fortunate because I can charge it at home, but all fine and well. I haven't had the opportunity to do long distance trip on it just yet, given it's slightly a week and a half old, but based on some of the metrics I've seen, it's about 22 to 23 kilowatts per every 100 kilometers for the interstate highways. So yeah, if you're interested in looking into those, I'm quite sure there are some metrics and numbers in other videos that you can kind of reference against. So in summary, does this car live up to my expectations from when I first drove it in the test drive to now? I would say very much so. It's one of the better cars I've driven in a long while. Love the comfort, loving the capabilities and the features that come with it. Of course, I kind of nitpick on a little bit of software consistencies and stuff that could potentially be improved upon, but nonetheless, like I said, those are stuff that potentially will be fixed in a couple of OTAs, so I'm not overly critical and fussed about it. So hope you guys found some good insights in case you're also looking at purchasing the Sealion 7. But meanwhile, do leave me a like, subscribe, or even a comment if you want to, have something to discuss about, or maybe an idea for the next video. Till next time, I'll see you in the next one.